be screwed. Feel my own adrenaline, yeah, I do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the fourth part of, What If Ichigo Enters Dannyphantom? Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of HauntedScythe on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. The snake-like hollow reached its prey in record time despite its humongous size. Danny flashed away in a shuanpa and reappeared near the gate where the hollow entered. She is fast, Danny thought as she finally took in the obviously female upper body. The hollow's head whirled around and looked at her. The beast's eyes narrowed and she howled at the Shinigami she was facing. You seem to be different from the other hollows I've met so far, Danny muttered, but to her surprise the hollow's eyes widened. You actually take your time to talk to your enemy, the snake woman asked in a disbelieving tone. That stunned everyone in the arena. This hollow could actually talk and it seemed to be more calm than her comrades. Not really. I didn't know you could understand me. The others couldn't, the student shrugged and pulled out her sword. You're quite funny little one. But I want to end this. No matter what happens from now on I will die anyways. Either you kill me or she kills me for hurting/killing you, the hollow pointed at Soifon who had already her Zanpakuto ready. I guess you are right. At least let's make your last fight worthwhile, Danny shrugged and positioned her Zanpakuto sideways to her body. A strange one indeed, the hollow deadpanned and also readied herself. The other students only gaped how casually Danielle chatted with the hollow before her. The two charged at each other. Danny brought her sword forward in a sideway arc while the hollow turned in mid-charge and swung her tail forward. Steel met scales and sparks erupted into the air. Due to the momentum the sword slid along the scaled tail and gave Danny the leverage she needed to propel herself up into the air. She concentrated her Ryatsu under her feet and pressed herself off towards her enemy. The hollow brought her clawed right hand forward and scratched Danny's right shoulder. But because of that the hollow was too slow to react as the Zanpakuto cut through her mask. She howled in pain as she felt her Ryatsu leave her body through the cut. Danny landed behind her in a crouch before she turned around to block any incoming attack that could follow, not noticing the scratches on her shoulder. To her shock though she had to watch how the hollow slowly began wither away in what seemed to be agonizing pain. What have I done, she thought remorseful. End her pain. It would be inhuman to keep her suffering like this, Pyracota sighed sadly. Will do, the girl hung her head and walked over to the wailing hollow. The other watched her in awe and confusion. She stopped beside the snake-like head and rose her Zanpakuto above it upside down. Please forgive me, she whispered and pushed her sword downwards. With cracking sound the sword pierced the bone-like mask. The wailing stopped immediately as her Ryatsu began to seep into the young Shinigami. Thank you, the hollow whispered before she dissolved into Ryatsu particles. The moment the last piece of Ryatsu entered Danny's body she fell over and cried out in pain. Pyracota fell from her hand as she curled herself up into a ball. Soifon immediately flashed to her side and tried to get her to speak. Danny? Danny! Come on, talk to me, the woman yelled, but to no avail. Though something caught her eye through the deep opening of the girl's outfit. There in her stomach a hollow hole was forming. Oh God! It's happening so fast. I have to get her away from here, Soifon thought and picked the girl up. Class is dismissed for now. The exam will continue at a later date, Soifon yelled as she vanished in a shuanpa, making everyone look at the spot she stood shocked. It was rumored that the two of them got along quite well because they behaved like sisters quite often, but Soifan's recent reaction seemingly proved another rumor. She treated Danielle more like a daughter, and that would mean that she was most likely a couple with Danny. Soifan and Danny reappeared right in front of the fourth squad, and a member came running to her. "Get Captain Unohana here immediately. I have an emergency," the slender woman yelled in panic, making the man run as if the devil was after him. Seconds later said captain appeared and picked Danielle from her fellow captain's arms. Together they hurried to a separated room. The tall woman placed the girl on the bed and stripped of her sleeveless top to show her bare upper body. She watched in awe, panic and interest how a hole began to expand from her belly button. Till now it was 2 inches in diameter, and it still grew slowly. Danny's painful cries began to succumb to a whimper. Unohana began to scan the girl's body with her ryatsu and found that, like with her father, a new energy was starting to awaken within her, but also something else. Suifeng knelt by the bedside and held her surrogate daughter's hand in an attempt to soothe her with her presence. After 30 more agonizing minutes, the hole finally stopped growing at roughly 6 inches in diameter. Her whimpering ended and made place for her calm and even breathing. "Will she be all right?" the smaller woman asked, worried, her eyes never leaving the seemingly sleeping girl. "Yes, she will be fine. From what Daniel-san told me about his awakening, it is most likely that she is in her inner world right now meeting her hollow," Unohana explained with a frown and sat on the chair on the other side of the bed. "So now we wait?" Soifan asked a bit calmer. "Yes, now we wait," the medic nodded, not wanting to believe what she just found. Danny's unconscious body laying in the sand of a tropic beach. Beside her sat an appealing woman with short red military-styled hair and brown eyes. She wore red hakama pants with yellow flame designs licking up to her knees and no shoes. Her top consisted of a simple red bikini top. The woman smiled at the girl beside her and stroked her head gently. "You know you can join us, right?" she asked seemingly no one. A girl stepped out of the near woodside and began to walk towards the two. She looked exactly like Danny but had white skin, white hair and a white sleeveless Shinigami outfit. Also her eyes were black with yellow iris. On her hip hung a white blade and a green hilt. "So you are not gonna question me who I am?" the newcomer asked, curious. "I already know who you are." "Hollow," the redhead answered without turning around. "I guess our MSTR informed you," the hollow stated, sarcastic. "Yes. Her father is the same as us," the woman stated as she began to shake Danny awake. "Oh. That sounds interesting," the hollow mused, more to herself. 5 more minutes, Daddy," Danielle pouted and turned away from the shaking hand. The redhead and hollow looked at their MSTR with a dumbfounded expression before both started to laugh. "Oh, this is good, our MSTR is a lazy princess," the hollow panted, laughing. "I know what you mean," the redhead laughed. "So who are you?" the hollow asked after she regained her breath. "My name is Pyrakata, and you?" the now identified Zanpakuto spirit answered. "I don't have a name yet. I was only just now awakened after sleeping for all her life," the hollow explained with a sad tone. "Then I'll call you Trisha," Danielle's voice cut into their conversation. Both women looked at her surprised. Not even a minute ago she was still fast asleep, and now she just sat there with a goofy grin on her face, her legs crossed under her and her hand pressed onto her crossed ankles to lean forward. "Did you have too much sugar again, Danielle?" Pyro asked in a deadpan tone. "Hui," Danny exclaimed, mock hurt. "Can we be serious for a moment?" Trisha asked, calm, but it was visible that she felt tense. "Sure, why not?" the girl answered and began to swing forward and backwards. Pyrakata looked at her MSTR with a deadpan look. "How is this girl my MSTR?" she sighed. "Okay, serious now," the hollow growled. "So you are my inner hollow? You're kinda appealing," Danny smiled as she mustered the girl before her. "You know that I look exactly like you except for my hollow attributes, right?" Trisha asked, calm. And? Can't I find myself appealing? The girl shot back. Before either Trisha of Pyracota could shoot back and answer, her mood changed. The laid-back girl turned serious. All fun and games aside. You see, I thought you would be some cold-hearted beat, seeing as you are a negative version of myself, but you seem to be quite fun. Danny paused for a moment to let the information settle in. But that aside, I think you are here to see if I'm worthy your power or not, am I right? She continued. You could say that. Trisha shrugged and sat down in front of the two women. So what is it you want in exchange? Danny asked as she eyed her hollow. I don't know, but she said that your father is the same as us. How did he handle his hollow? Trisha asked. Danielle looked at her Zanpakuto spirit with a questioning look. Hey, it was the first thing that came to mind when we talked. Pyracota shrugged with a small smile. Okay, that aside. Yes, my dad is the same as us, and from what he told me is that he made his hollow a deal, the Shinigami explained, serious. What kind of deal? Trisha narrowed her eyes. His hollow and Zanpakuto fused together, and like this he could experience the outside world through my father's senses, she explained, calm, but her nervousness was visible. So she and I become one and then we are all happy? Trisha asked as she gestured between her and the Pyracota. Hey, does my opinion on this all even count? The Zanpakuto asked, a bit peeved. Of course it does. I was just explaining how it worked. Danny defended herself, a bit hurt about her Zanpakuto's mistrust. Oh, okay then, said woman, hung her head a bit for mistrusting her MSTR like that. So what do you think about it then? Trisha asked, looking at the spirit before her. I think it would only be fair for you to experience the outside world just like us. But I'm also afraid of what will happen to me if we actually fuse, Pyro explained with a small shudder at the last part. From what Dad told me, Phantasma didn't really change except for his appearance and being a bit more thick-headed. But I can't be sure what will happen to you if you actually do it. Danny shrugged, giving her thoughts to the conversation. The Zanpakuto spirit began to muse over her options for a few minutes. She ignored the other two as she remembered something Suzumabachi had told her shortly after her awakening. Life is only worth something if you risk something, so I say let's do it, she suddenly said with a calm smile. Her nerves had calmed down during her musing and she looked at her Danny and Trisha with confident look. Sounds good to me, Trisha laughed and offered her future counterpart a hand. Pyracota took the offered hand and Trisha turned into dark red particles before she entered the Zanpakuto's body. The spirit only sat there with her hand outstretched and her eyes closed. Slowly she pulled her hand back and put it in her lap. The feeling of strength flooded her body as she felt a new side merging to her own. Danny also felt the power surge but kept her mouth shut. After what felt like an eternity, the spirit opened her eyes again. Yet instead of the chocolate brown eyes, yellow eyes looked at the sky above. Danny also noticed that her red hair had gained white tips. How are you feeling, Py? The girl asked, unsure if she should even speak. I'm fine. It will take some time to get used to this new power, she explained, calm as she tried to get a feeling for her new power. So am I allowed to release your shurikai now? Danny asked with a big smile. You and your priorities. Pyro sighed and shook her head. But yes, you can unseal my shurikai from now on. This power boost was enough to do it. Though I suggest that you return to the outside world now, she finished. Why that? Can't I stay a little longer? It's so appealing and calm here, the girl sighed and looked at the ocean. Your Nechan and Anohana-san are waiting for you to wake up. Pyro teased her MSTR with the first part. Oh, Kami Nechan is gonna fry my butt. Danny panicked and began to vanish from her inner world. The body on the hospital bed began to stir, making the women at her side look up. Danny's eyes fluttered open as she took in her surrounding. She saw white walls and a white ceiling. Beside her she felt the presence of two captain-level beings. She looked to her left and saw Soifon looking at her with a worried look in her eyes. To her right she saw Captain Unohana with a sad frown on her face. Why the sad looks? The girl asked with a small smile. "Danny, you scared us," the slender captain asked as she hugged the girl close to herself and buried her head in the white hair of her young charge. "Come on, Nachan, we knew this would happen," Danny tried to soothe her by stroking her back. "But I was still worried," Soifan whispered into her hair. While the two hugged each other, Captain Unohana eyed the two of them with a worried frown. What she had found would change the girl's life forever and maybe scar her just as much. She wasn't sure if she should tell her or not. "Danielle-san. I have to tell you something," she made the decision to tell her after all. The women separated from each other and looked at her with confused looks on her faces. "What is it, Captain Unohana?" Danny asked, confused about what the medic would tell her. "During your hollow's awakening something happened," the captain sighed. "I know, my hollow hole formed," Danielle explained as her finger traced the hole in her stomach. "Well, because of that something else happened," the medic tried to explain. "And what would that be?" Soifan asked, equally confused. "Well, because of the hole in your stomach, you can no longer bear any children. It destroyed your WMB," the medic explained, suddenly feeling so much older. Soifan and Danny looked at her in shock, trying to understand what they were just told. "I can't have any children," Danny mused sadly. "Danny will never be able to have children of her own," Soifan worried. "So I can never give birth to child," Danny voiced her thoughts. "I'm sorry," Unohana sighed and hung her head a bit. "What about an unnatural way?" the girl continued. "What do you mean, Danny?" Soifan asked, confused, not knowing where she was going with her thoughts. "Well, you see, I wasn't born normally either," and so the girl explained her creation to the two captains. Danny lay on the couch with his arms folded behind his head and looked up to the ceiling. "I guess this plan is the best solution I can come up with at the moment." He sighed as he finished his planing. A groan from the bed made it clear that Orihime was waking up. The espada sighed but stayed still. Orihime sat up and held her head. "I just had the weirdest dream. Phantom-san was a Arankar and worked for Aizen," she muttered. "I'm sorry, but weren't dreaming, Inoue-san," Dan sighed and sat up to face her. Inoue looked at him shocked and covered her mouth with her hands. There before her sat the one man that had helped them during Rukia's rescue mission. Phantom-san," she stuttered. "Yes, Inoue-san, but here I'm called Vandal Dan," the Primera explained calm. "But why Phantom-san? Why did you betray the Soul Society?" the girl pleaded, confused. With a groan, Dan created a keto barrier around his room. "Listen, Inoue-san. I'm here on an undercover mission for the Soul Society because of my hollow powers. Right now I have infiltrated Aizen's organization as the highest-ranking member of his espada to sabotage all his attempts," Danny explained, serious as he held eye contact with her. "Hollow powers?" Inoue asked, confused. "Before I died I was already different, and when I died I gained Shinigami and hollow powers. Even back then when we met I already had a hollow hole in my chest," he explained, serious, pointing at the hole in his heart. Inoue only stared at him, confused, as she tried to understand what he had just told her. "Listen, Inoue-san, there's something we have to talk about." Dan stood up and walked to a table nearby where got himself and her an apple. "From here on you are under my protection since Aizen ordered me to be your guardian while you are here. But others won't be stopped from attacking you. That's why I have formed a plan to prevent you from attacking you," he explained and passed her an apple which she caught clumsy. "I have a certain reputation here to keep the females off my back. Officially I can't move on from my PRGN wife I left behind when I died. So from now on we will pretend that while talking we found out that you are my daughter. Since I never said how long I was dead, it could be a possibility. That way you will be protected from the other hollows," Dan explained in between bites. The orange-haired girl looked at him bewildered but nodded her head. She was afraid of the hollows and Aizen, that went without a question. Now she had a protector. Someone she knew and could trust. Someone very powerful. "So I have to call you, father," she stuttered as she eyed the apple in her hand. No, we just say that you are not used to it and you keep calling me Vandal-san of Dan-san, the man explained serious. Oh, and by the way, I already have 2 daughters calling me dad and another child on the way. That's enough for me right now. I don't think I can handle a nearly full-grown woman. Dan smiled at her gaping look. Come on, let's go for a walk. You can eat the apple on the way. Some fresh air will do you good, he explained and deactivated the barrier around the room. Toegther they walked out of his palace and entered the desert around it. As they walked, she felt angry hot stares on her back. She looked around and found 4 women stare at her from a nearby balcony. Don't worry about them. They have been trying to get into my pants for a while now but always failed, Dan explained, calm, making her blush like mad at his inkling. You see, when I left the living world my lover was PRGNNT. She was such a lovely woman. Caring yet thick-headed. I've yet to find someone her equal. He suddenly changed the topic, making her look at him confused. What do you mean, Fa? Vandal-san, in no way, corrected herself. You see, your mother was a strong woman. Though she was way too thick-headed for her own good sometimes. Vandal smiled calm and the girl finally caught onto what he was planning. Yeah, Ka-chan was always so thick-headed, but she was the nicest mother I ever had. In no way smiled at the memory of her mother. You do know that she was your only mother, right? He deadpanned, making her smile sheepish and rubbed the back of her head. Yeah. You're right, she grinned and stuck out her tongue. She could feel the change in the angry looks on her back to something more curious. It seemed like the women were more interested in their conversation than glaring at her in jealousy. So how did you meet my mother anyway? She suddenly asked. Well, you see. When I came to town I knew nobody, but I admired this one girl from the university. She was so smart and strong but unreachable for me because I was a stranger. Then one day in the library I helped a girl to get a book from a high shelf. That girl was your mother. We hit it off right then and there. We were head over heels for each other. We met every day to talk or have fun. It was like I was in heaven. And when I heard that she was PRGNNT I was overjoyed, he explained with a smile as he thought about his soifon and how he met her. And why did you leave us then? Orihime asked, confused, while the women nodded to themselves. That day I left work earlier and went to the jeweler to get the engagement ring I had in making. As I left the shop I saw a girl about to be run over by a truck, and without thinking I shoved her aside, taking the hit for her. I died the moment my head hit the street. The rest is history, he explained, but muttered the last part. So this woman is Vandal-san's daughter. I thought she would be younger, Harabelle thought as she knew not to harm the girl. The other girls had similar thoughts, though they still hated the girl because she was a human. So they were also planning on how to make her life miserable without getting in trouble with their beloved Vandal-san. As they walked, a new presence closed in on them. In a static sound, a blue-haired man appeared behind Danny with his right hand in striking position. Before Orihime could react to the newcomer, Dan had already turned around and stopped the striking hand with his pinky. The ground behind the Primera shook a bit but remained undamaged. Hello Grimjow, Dan deadpanned with a bored expression. DMN not again, the Espada grinned as he stepped back and looked at the other Espada. What can we do for you Grimjow? Dan asked, calm, already in position to protect Inoue if he needed to. I've business with her, the Wild growled and pointed at Inoue. And what could you want from my daughter? Vandal narrowed his eyes at his fellow warrior. I wanted her to heal the scar on my BA, wait. Your daughter, he began before he registered the statement of his superior. Yes, Orihime is my daughter. You got a problem with that? The Primera narrowed his eyes and let a bit of his Ryatsu leak out. SHT, sorry man. I just wanted to ask if she would heal the scar on my back, he actually stuttered. Grimjow knew not to mess with the Primera. He had done so before and he had beaten him into the ground with his pinky only. After that he had gained a huge amount of respect for the new Primera. And unlike his usual hot-headed appearance, he was a member of the resistance against Aizen along with Nell. Of course. Would you be so kind, Inoue-chan? The man asked calm, and she nodded, though she felt unsure to help the man that hurt her precious Kurosaki-kun. Esoten kiss hun, she whispered, and 2 pins of her slide shot off towards the espada. A oval shield appeared over his back as the scar began to heal and his espada number became visible again. A minute later the shield vanished and the fairies returned to the sealed form. Thanks, Grimjow muttered, and vanished in a sonido. He seems different from before, Inoue stuttered, a bit shocked. You two met before? Danny asked, curious. Yeah, when he was fighting Kurosaki-kun, she stuttered and began to fumble her fingers together. So he went out to start a fight again. He will never learn. The Primera shook his head with a smile. Orihime giggled at how childish the Primera sounded, and they continued their relaxed walk around Las Noches. It's been a week since Orihime had come to be under guardianship of Aizen's Primera. During that week nothing much had happened except for a few lower Arancars thinking it would be a good idea to attack her when Vandal wasn't around. This usually ended with a Arancar or a Jutsu's wounded or dead, depending how serious their attempts were. Right now Orihime and Dan sat in a garden on top of his palace. The girl bathed her feet in the cold water of the artificial river running through the garden and looked at the different flowers around her. The Primera meanwhile sat in the pavilion behind her on a fragile-looking chair with his right leg resting on his left as he read a book. The silence was only interrupted by the sound of running water and fluttering leaves. This is a wonderful place, Dan-san. I never would have guessed that there would be a place like this here. Orihime smiled and no longer uneasy being in the enemy's territory. I know. I made it after I got this palace. It's a hobby I have since I was alive, he smiled, not looking up from his book. I never took you for the gardening and reading type, Orihime giggled. I have many talents not many knew of. I was also a awesome cook back in the days. But I haven't touched a stove in years. He felt bad about lying to her like that, even if it was just about something so unimportant like cooking. The presence nearby forced him to lie, or he could be giving the enemy too many hints about himself and blow his cover in the worst moment ever. Right then a hollow eagle landed on the backrest of the chair beside him. What can I do for you, Michiru-san? The espada asked calm, not looking up from his book. Michiru was the only official fraction he had, and he was only a weak jutsu. He had a white armored body with an amazing wingspan of 7 feet and red-tipped feathers. The sharp red markings around his eyes gave him more of an Egyptian look. Even being the fraction of the Primera Espada, the bird didn't want to evolve. He loved his freedom as a bird in the sky of Huenco Mundo. There weren't many bird-type hollows, so it was pretty much his very own domain. He also was Danny eyes and ears outside of Las Noches. I have important news, Vandal-sama. There are 3 intruders out in the desert. They are making their way here as we speak, the bird explained in a squeaking voice. This caught both Danny's and Orihime's attention. The girl turned around to face the bird she had come to like quite a lot. Danny shut his books with a loud thud and put it on the table in front of him before he faced his messenger. Can you describe them? He asked, serious. Yes. One is a Shinigami with orange hair and a giant Zanpakuto. The second is a very tall dark-skinned man with dark shaggy hair. The last one is a guy with glasses and a white outfit. Michiru paused for a moment. Oh, and the last one looks like he has the same totem pole up his ass as Ulquiorra-sama, he finished with a chuckle. Orihime tried not to laugh at the description of the last person she knew to be Ishida, but that kind of went down the drain when she realized who had also come. Kurosaki-kun and Chato-san are here, she muttered, shocked. It seems like it, but didn't you forget someone in that group? Danny rose an eyebrow. Oh right. Ishida-san is also here, she smiled sheepish. Michiru-san, you did good. Go and take a rest. Dan thanked his messenger and said. Bird nodded before he flew off again. I didn't think they would come here so early, the Primera sighed and stood up. Please, Orihime grabbed his jacket with a pleading look in her eyes. Please don't fight them, the girl begged near tears. Don't worry Inoue-san, I don't plan on fighting them. The fight would be pointless seeing that I'm stronger than they currently are. Plus I'm supposed to be your guardian, so it would be counterproductive to search out any kind of conflict, the man explained and stretched his muscles as her grip on his jacket relaxed. Come on, let's grab something to eat. There's no need to starve hoping they are safe. We will know when they are here for sure, seeing as Kurosaki-san seems to be more of a wrecker than a silent infiltrator. Dan laughed, making her also smile. Maybe I will even cook something, he shrugged as he gently pulled her to her feet. As the two walked into the palace, Phantasma spoke up. Danny, we have a slight problem, he stated, unsure. And would that be? The man asked, totally calm about any problem they would have to face. Well, you see, it seems like your Shinigami and hollow sides have merged beyond a critical point without any of us noticing, the spirit explained, unnerved by the fact that he missed it. And that means, the Espada became worried now. If something unnerved Phantasma, then it would surely be a big problem. That means that you can no longer return to your pure Shinigami side. You will be stuck like this forever, the shaman sighed and actually put out his pipe for once. This made the Primera actually stop in mid-step. Inoue noticed him stopping but didn't say anything. She had learned not to disturb him when his eyes looked to glazed over. That was a sign that he was talking to his Zanpakuto spirit. What do you mean stuck? How can I be stuck like this? SHT. Sui-chan is gonna kill me, he panicked a bit before he got a mental slap from his spirit. Well, at least you are even better equipped than you were before. You can make her scream your name without a problem. The shaman had regained his good mood. Pervert, the man grumbled, though he blushed a bit at that future outlook. So do I get any advantages from the merging? He changed the topic. So far I would say that your physical abilities will amplify at least twofold. You will most likely regain all your former ghost powers, if not even more. Your Ryatsu reserves are skyrocketing at the moment and they don't seem to hit an end anytime soon. Though I'm controlling the power influx you are absorbing from the Ryatsu surrounding you right now, I can't do that much longer. The power will soon be too much to handle for me, so you will have to learn how to control and suppress it on your own. What will happen later I can't say right now, so we'll have to wait and see, Phantasma explained in a thoughtful tone. So I will have some real SHT to deal with till my two halves are merged and my power is stabilized. Dan thought, really worried what could happen if he messed up. You could say that. So you better be careful from now on, the spirit sighed, feeling bad for his MSTR. Can you at least tell me roughly how long it will take? The Espada asked, hopeful. I would say about 5 days or so, but I'm not sure, the spirit sighed and ended the conversation. With the conversation finished, Danny returned to the present and continued his walk into the palace. Dan and Inoue sat on top of the pillars inside the dome and watched the three invaders run into the dome. The Primera's eye twitched as he noticed the Ryatsu level of the three. Ichigo has trained a bit, but he is still weak. Chad made a great process, and the Quincy still has the totem pole up his ass. He is worse than Ulquiorra, Dan thought, disappointed. Are they gonna be okay, Dan-san? Inoue asked, worried. Don't worry, they will be fine. Ichigo was always a underdog, but he always made it out somehow. The Primera sighed and offered the girl a cup of tea. Thanks, she accepted the cup and took a sip. So what are we gonna do now? She asked after another sip. We wait and see. The Primera leaned back and extended his senses so that he didn't need his eyes. I trust you on this, Dan-san. I can only hope you know what you are doing, she sighed and sipped her tea. Hours passed and finally something happened. Dan and Inoue had returned to his palace and were eating lunch when Ichigo knocked the door down and stormed the room. Dan only sighed at the teen's antics. Orihime, he yelled like a madman and looked around till he saw her with fork halfway to her mouth staring at him with big eyes. Hello Kurosaki-kun, she waved with the fork in hand. Please refrain from staining the floor, Inoue-chan. I like my place to be clean, the Arankar scolded her. I'm sorry, Dan-san. The girl bowed her head and put the fork on the table. What's going on here, Orihime? Who is that? Ichigo yelled, pointing Zangetsu at the Primera. You are too loud, boy. Your manners are worse than Neutra's. The Arankar sighed and rubbed his temples. You didn't answer my question, the Shinigami yelled. The room was suddenly flooded with Ryatsu so strong that it made the orange-haired teen crash face first on the floor while Inoue remained unaffected. You are a rude brute. You break into my place and then you try to threaten me. The Primera stood up and walked over to the downed teen. You are lucky that I'm a very patient man and that Inoue-chan wants you unharmed. So from now on refrain from disrespecting me, boy. The Ryatsu vanished and Ichigo took a deep breath. With that the Primera walked back to the table while Inoue ran to her downed friend. Are you alright, Kurosaki-kun? She asked as she helped him up. I'm fine, Orihime, he mumbled and stood up. He gave the Primera a wary look but knew that he wouldn't stand a chance. So, who are you? The teen asked, nervous. My name is Vandal Dan. I am the Primera Espada. The man nodded and rested his head on his hand. Ichigo only shivered at the thought of facing the strongest Espada in Aizen's ranks. He knew that he stood no chance seeing as the man downed him with only his Ryatsu. I assume that you are here to take Inoue-chan back to the living world, Vandal continued, not bothered by the shivering teen. You could say that, Ichigo mumbled. Then take her, but if something happens to her then I will rip you a new one, understood? Dan asked with narrowed eyes, making the Shinigami sweat. I understand, he nodded. Kurosaki, a new voice ripped through the hallway before the palace. Oh God, here we go again, Dan sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Grimmjow jumped into the room with the usual insane glint in his eyes. Remember, no fighting in my place, Grimmjow, Dan stated, calm, making the Espada gulp. Right. I forgot. Let's go, Kurosaki. The blue-haired maniac grabbed the Shinigami and ran outside. Do you really think that's okay? Inoue asked, uneasy. Don't worry about them. Ichigo can handle Grimmjow if he takes him serious. Dan smiled and walked over to her. Come on, let's watch the fight. I'm in the mood for some entertainment. Dan smiled and guided her to the roof of the palace. The two sat down at the bench at the side of the palace and watched the battle under them unfold. At first the fight seemed boring but then activated Grimmjow his resurrection. Soon the battle seemed to become more one-sided in favor of the Espada. To Ichigo's luck did his recent fights lengthen the time span in which he could use his hollow powers. When Inoue saw his mask thought she began to shiver in fright. Is something wrong, Inoue-chan? Dan asked, putting his hand on her back. Kurosaki-kun, looks like, she stuttered but drifted off at the end. Don't worry, Inoue-chan. Ichigo is just like me, but he never evolved to the point I did. He is still the same man you knew. Dan soothed her worries but put up a Ryatsu shield in front of them. A powerful shock wave hit the shield but didn't even scratch it. I guess you're right. Kurosaki-kun would never become such a monster, she sighed with a weak smile. Don't be so sure, Dan pointed out, making her stare at him in question. Ichigo never faced his hollow like I did. He's still trying to subdue him instead of accepting him. That's why his power is so unstable. Dan sighed and Inoue calmed down. Come on. You should cheer your lover up or he might get his butt handed to him, the Espada smiled. Inoue blushed up a storm but turned her attention to the fight. Ichigo had began to lose the battle. His resolve seemed to crumble and that made him lose the fight. The young woman looked a bit lost but she collected herself again. Don't lose, Kurosaki-kun, she yelled, making him look up to her. Grimmjow used the distraction to attack but was stopped one-handed. Ichigo turned to him and smiled. I'm sorry, Grimmjow. But I can't lose here, he smiled and slashed the Espada across the chest. Grimmjow fell to the ground bleeding like mad. With a sigh the Primera stood up and grabbed Inoue's shoulder. They vanished in a sonido and reappeared beside the downed Espada. Could you heal him, Inoue-chan? he asked, calm, making her nod. But why would you want to heal him? I just beat him, Ichigo whined, making the Primera sigh. Grimmjow is part of the resistance against Aizen. I still need him once we make a move against that traitor, Dan explained, stern, gaining a wide-eyed look from the Shinigami. But I thought you worked for Aizen, Ichigo asked, confused, while Inoue healed the Arrancar. Only for show. I'm a spy for the Soul Society. I'm surprised that you still didn't recognize me, Ichi-chan, the Primera teased. Ichigo stared at him confused till his eyes widened. Only 2 people called him that, and these were Yoruchi and Danny. Danny? He asked, unsure. The one and only, but better, the man grinned. But how? Ichigo was now really confused. I was just like you. A Shinigami with hollow powers, but unlike you I found a way to connect to him and gain his strength, the Arrancar explained. But enough of that. I would say that you have another fight coming soon. So get some rest, Dan finished, calm, making Ichigo nod. Inoue finished healing the Espada and turned to Ichigo and started healing him. You really did a number on me, Kurosaki, Grimmjow grinned and rolled his shoulder. You're a strange guy, Grimmjow, Kurosaki concluded and let his Bankai fade away. Come on, let's go before someone sees me talking to you guys. It could blow my cover sooner than I wanted to, Dan ordered and grabbed Inoue, who just finished healing her friend. With that the 4 vanished in a Shuinpa. Seconds later Harabelle and her fraction appeared on the scene looking at the destroyed environment. This must have been an interesting battle. I would say between Grimmjow and this Shinigami intruder, the Espada concluded. Maybe I should visit Vandal-san. His palace is near after all, she thought with a small grin. What she didn't know was that her fraction thought the same thing. They were about to make their way towards their target, but a Ryatsu spike from said palace made them stop. They knew this Ryatsu. Someone must have pissed off Vandal-san, they all thought, and stopped themselves from bothering him. They knew not to mess with him when his patience was wearing thin, so they left him alone. Danny sighed as she leaned back in her bed while the 2 captains were talking to each other. She had just finished her explanation on how she was born and the 2 women were shocked. So what are we gonna do? We can let anyone find out about Danny's condition, Suifeng asked her fellow captain. I think that won't be a problem. She just has to change her hakama back to the usual one and the hole in her abdomen would be covered up, Tunohana shrugged after a moment of thinking. No, I won't cover it up, Danny interrupted the captains. They looked at her shocked and confused. But why not? Do you have any idea what could happen if your friends see it? Suifeng asked, afraid that the girl would be shunned. I'm proud of my powers and their heritage. If the others can't accept me because of it, then they are not worth my time. Dad also hid his hole and I saw how he suffered lying to his friends, Danny stated firm and crossed her arms over her chest. And anyway, I trust into my friends. Even if not everyone accepts me, I know they will, the girl gave the adults a confident smile. Okay, but if something happens I will step in and kick massive butt, Suifeng huffed while Unohana only grinned how protective her fellow captain had become. You'll become a good mother, she thought, proud of the young woman. Then I would say that you get ready for school again. Tomorrow the other students need to make their first kill, the slender woman sighed and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Can I really go? Danny asked the tall medic. I found no abnormalities in your condition. If I had to say, I would say you're healthier than ever because your hollow hole finally formed, Tunohana gave her patient a gentle smile. But you have to report to me immediately if you notice something off. You understand? She asked stern and got a nod from the girl. Then you can go now. I'll send my report to the captain commander. With that Unohana left the room and went to check on her other patients. The 2 remained there for a moment in silence before they looked at each other. So how are we gonna explain this? Danny asked and pointed at her stomach. I'll think of something, Suifeng grinned, making Danny smile. Come on, let's get something to eat, Danny stated and jumped out of the bed. Suifeng only looked at her girl and laughed before both vanished in a Shuinpa. Good morning class, Suifon greeted the class before her. She had come up with a plausible story for Danny's change and would present it today. The class greeted her, but it was obvious they were nervous about something. Suifon-sensei, Takate asked a bit nervous. Yes, Takate-san, she asked calm as she eyed the nervous teen. Is Danielle-san alright? He asked, getting eager nods from his friends. She is just fine, Suifon smiled as she looked at the majority of the class. They all seemed to be relieved that their friend was alright, though she still noticed some confusion in them. But what happened yesterday? Hikari asked, but afraid of the answer. Well, Danielle-san finally unlocked her family's power. Suifon sighed and thought about their shocked faces when she revealed her little sister's secret. What kind of power? Samon asked, confused. Well, like her father, she had a special condition before she became a Shinigami. But it would be easier for her to show you than to explain it. Danielle, you can come in now, Suifon explained, serious before she called Fro said girl. The door opened and everyone watched as Danny stepped into the room and walked past them. The people behind her gasped in shock to the confusion of the other. Only when she turned her back to them to walk beside Suifon the others saw it as well. Her back was in full view and so was her hollow hole. When she reached her surrogate mother, she turned and faced the class with a nervous look on her face. As you have seen, Danielle-san has a hollow hole just like her father. They have gained the power of both Shinigami and Hollow through their special condition before their death. Because of that, they have also access to far greater powers than a normal Shinigami, Suifon explained and put a reassuring hand on Danny's shoulder. What do you mean greater power? Takate asked, confused. He knew that Danny was different from others and that she actually was so special wasn't much of a shock to him. Though the whole was a mere setback to his crush. The elders of his clan would never allow him to court her, not that he actually cared. Since Danny had taken over their class, he was broken out of his old mindset and he saw that the elders were just a bunch of fools. She has 2 Ryatsu pools. 1 Shinigami and 1 Hollow. Each pool will grow on their own and give her a power boost when needed. Her stamina also increased along with her senses, Suifon explained and smiled at the odd expressions on their faces. So she's getting even stronger than already was? Samon asked, stunned. You can bet your pretty boy group face on that, Danny cheered, making everyone laugh while Samon pouted at the boy group part. Settle down everyone, the captain clapped her hands to get their attention. Today we will continue with yesterday's exam, she continued, gaining nervous looks from the class. The rules are the same as yesterday. So let's go, the woman yelled and walked out of the room towards the arena. So it is decided. We will mobilize our troops to stop the traitor Aizen once and for all, Yamato ordered stern. We already have a faked Karakura town up and running, so when he enters the living world he will end up there and we can take him down, Mayuri explained, serious. The captains nodded their heads in agreement. They knew the upcoming battle would be hard and exhausting. But they also knew that their secret ally would be a great asset. While we take care of Aizen and his espada, Lieutenant Phantom will take care of things in Huenco Mundo before he aids us in battle. Captain Kenpachi, Captain Unohana, Captain Byakuya, Rukia and Renji will go to Huenco Mundo to assist him, the Captain Commander stated, gaining another round of nods. I have a question, Captain Commander, Hitsugaya asked calm. Everyone looked at childlike Captain with interest and Yamato barely opened an eye to look at him before he gestured for him to continue. I wanted to know where Captain Suifon is during such an important meeting, he asked calm while the other captains looked at the empty seat of the 2nd Division. Captain Suifon is unable to join the battle due to her condition, the old man stated calm, making his subordinates look at him confused except for Unohana. What kind of condition are you talking about, Captain Commander? I just saw Captain Suifon a few hours ago, Matsumoto asked from behind her captain. Yamato looked at the orange-haired woman for a moment before he gestured for Unohana to explain the situation. Well, Captain Suifon is unable to join the upcoming battle because her Ryatsu is unstable at the moment, the medic explained calm. Why would she be unstable? She didn't even do anything for I don't know how long, Kenpachi huffed annoyed. The temperature in the room suddenly dropped and they looked at the source of the sudden change. Unohana sat in her usual seat but her calm smile changed into something cold and sinister while her eyes were shadowed by her hair. The other captains shivered at the sight and gulped nervous. They knew not to PSS of said woman and Kenpachi just did that. Well Kenchan, Unohana began in a melodic calm voice that could freeze the hell over multiple times. Captain Soifan can't assist in the fighting because she is PRGN. She finished her bloodthirsty look never shaking. The room fell silent at that. While they feared for their lives, they were also stunned that the Soifan, the man-hating captain of the second squad was actually PRGN. The silence was broken minutes later by an ecstatic squeal of Matsumoto before she ran out of the room to get presents for the unborn baby. Yamato grinned at his subordinates' reactions but coughed in his hand to get them back on track. Everyone snapped out of their shock and looked at him. Mobilize your squad. We will need every man and woman ready for battle, he ordered and everyone left the conference room. That toothpick actually got herself PRGNT. Not bad kiddo, Kenpachi grinned as he walked towards his squad. Not an hour later the 5 earlier mentioned Shinigami stood in Mayuri's lab to go to Huenko Mundo. The black gaping abyss before them made the 2 lower-ranked Shinigami shiver a bit. Let's go kiddos, Kenpachi laughed and jumped into the Garganta. Unohana and Byakuya followed without so much of a flinch. Rukia and Renji looked at each other before they gulped and jumped into the dark abyss that connected the worlds. The last student had just killed his hollow as the alarms blared all over the city. Okay children, this is not a drill. Get home and stay there. Soul Society is in a state of emergency. The academy will be closed until further note. Come on, get going, Soifan yelled, making her students run towards the exit. Danny noticed the lost and longing look of her surrogate mother's face and sighed. She knew that Suifone wanted to join the battle but couldn't because she was PRGN. It hurt the girl to see her mentor so lost, so she walked up to her and held her hand. Come on, let's go Suine, Danny smiled up to her. She still couldn't call Suifone her mother to her face. It was still too embarrassing. Said woman only looked at her mini-me and smiled gently. Yeah, let's go, she smiled, and the two left in a shunpa towards the second squad to get the other members ready for an eventual attack. It's been a few hours since the battle between Grimmjow and Ichigo, and Vandal had still to calm down. Just as they reappeared in his palace did Ichigo tell him that they were there without the knowledge of the Soul Society, and to make it worse did Chad and Ishida storm his place. With an angry glare he silenced the Quincy while Chad only stood by Ichigo, Orihime and Grimmjow. I can't believe this. Weeks of secret investigation, bowing to that SHT head of a traitor and leaving my family behind only for you guys to nearly bust the whole thing up, Dan muttered to himself but directed the last part at the 3 invaders. At least they had the decency to look sorry for their reckless actions. So, what are we gonna do now? Grimmjow asked, breaking the silence after Dan's rant. We keep up with the plan. Because of them, Aizen will accelerate his plan to invade Karakura town before he attacks the Siriidii. Once he and his followers enter the fake version of the town, we will take care of his remaining loyal pawns before we go and help the Shinigami getting rid of that rotten piece of SHT, Dan growled as he thought about how he would rip Aizen to pieces. But what about Wonder Weiss? He is too dangerous for Aizen to take him along. Harabel's fraction is F-strong as it is, but with the kid there the Shinigami will be toast, Grimmjow reasoned and leaned forward in his chair. I know, and that's why I'll kill him before the invasion starts, Dan sighed, getting a gasp from Inoue. She had met the childlike Arankar and actually liked him quite a lot. Hearing Dan talk about killing him so easily made her heart ache. Please Dan, can't you let him live? She pleaded, gaining weird looks from her friends. No can do, Inoue-chan. Wonderweiss only listens to Aizen. Once he gets a order he doesn't care for what happens as long as he fulfills his purpose. He isn't just any Arankar. He was created to counter the Captain Commander's Ryujin Jaka and he only follows Aizen's order. Dan rubbed his temples feeling a migraine coming up. Inoue looked at her hands in her lap and felt a little helpless. Grimjow, I think it's best if you go to the living world and meet up with others to inform them on our current status. The Primera sighed and the blue-haired man nodded. Will do. See you later, he grinned and flashed away. What was that about? Ishida asked with narrowed eyes. None of your business, Quincy. I have enough troob. Dan shot the white-clad teen down only to stop mid-sentence as he felt something outside of Las Noches. He felt 5 very familiar presences. Oh, take a rhino and F me sideways, he muttered, and gaining blushes from Ishida, Inoue, and Ichigo while Chad looked calm as ever. Wah! What's wrong, Dan-san? Inoue asked, confused as she fought against her blush. 5 Shinigami have entered Huenco Mundo and are making their way towards Las Noches as we speak, he sighed, and stood up. More traitors? Ichigo asked angry. No. Friends. Probably here to save your sorry asses, the Primera growled before he turned to leave. Where are you going? The Quincy demanded, only to be silenced by the Primera's glare. I'm doing my job and keep my friends from being turned into shish kebab should the other find them before me, Dan growled and duplicated himself to their shock. The 2 Dans nodded at each other before they vanished in a sonido. The 4 remaining people looked at the spot the split Primera just stood before they turned to face each other. What the hell? They all asked Union. Dan appeared in one of the many long white hallways of Las Noches. He looked around and smiled. Not far ahead of him he saw his prey. Wonderweiss was leaning against the handrail and stared out into the desert. The Primera kept a gentle smile and walked up to him and leaned against the handrail beside the kid. The blonde kid let his eyes drifted from the desert to him. Ah, he Hello, Wonderweiss, Dan smiled and patted his head. Ahaha, the kid grinned and enjoyed the touch. So what are you doing here, kiddo? The Primera inquired gently. Ah, ahaha, he out with a goofy smile. You're enjoying the view? That sounds enjoyable, the spy smiled and also looked out into the desert. Wonderweiss also looked back out into the desert and his goofy grin got wider. Dan looked at the child beside him from the corner of his eye. I'm sorry, kiddo, but don't worry, Fura will join you soon enough, he thought sadly. Don't worry, man. It's for the best. What Aizen did to him is unforgivable, Phantasma sighed. I know, he sighed. He concentrated his negative energy into his hand and made it glow bright red. Wonderweiss looked at the glowing hand in awe before he was silenced by it. Dan's hand ripped through the kid's head and killed him instantly. Before he fell to the ground he was turned into Erasure Particle and absorbed into the Primera. With a sonido he vanished before anyone could see him and appeared in the far desert of Huenco Mundo where Fura lived. The massive hollow looked at him in question before he was ended in a massive zero. You can join your friend in the afterlife, the Primera sighed and absorbed the erasure of the enormous hollow. The duplicate sighed once again and turned into erasure particles before they shot back to their original. Dan appeared in front of the 5 Shinigami and stopped them dead in their tracks. Each of them entered a battle stance. Chillick's people, the Espada groaned and held up his hands in a defensive manner. Danny, Renji asked with a risen eyebrow and let his guard down. Who else? The man sighed and looked at the group. What are you doing here? That's not part of the plan, the Espada asked unnerved. We're here to support Ichigo and his friends to save Orihime, Renji shrugged and Dan face-palmed. They are all at my palace relaxing right now, the Primera rubbed the bridge of his nose. So what are we gonna do now? Kunohana asked calm as she eyed her surrogate son. She noticed how strong and healthy he looked though his Ryatsu level seemed to be unstable. Is something wrong, Danny? She asked a bit concerned. What do you mean, Captain Unohana? He asked while the others looked at the 2 of them. Your Ryatsu seems to be unstable, she explained and the Primera sighed. The others looked at him in shock. They felt how powerful he was, and if he was unstable this would be disastrous. Well, it seems like Hollow half and my Shinigami half are merging. Neither me nor Phantasma noticed it before it was too late. He sighed as a huge amount of Racier particle shot towards him and entered his body through his back. What was that? Byakuya asked with his usual calm look in place. That was one of my newer powers. Duplication. The Primera smiled at their gaping looks. You can duplicate yourself? That might be a good challenge, Kenpachi grinned malicious. We can fight once this war is over. Dan smiled at the captain and he nodded, not really happy with it. So when will your Ryatsu stabilize again? Kunohana asked worried as she scanned his power level. It will take 3 more days or so. Phantasma isn't sure, but we can't stop it anyway. He smiled and patted the hand of his surrogate mother. Come on, let's go. Before Dan began only to be interrupted by a huge explosion coming from Las Noches. Dan sighed and gripped his jaw as he groaned. These idiots. I can't leave them alone for 5 minutes, he muttered and turned to the dome. What's going on? Rukia thought, afraid of the Ryatsu. It seems like Ichigo ran into Ulquiorra and started a fight. This idiot, he sighed and signaled for his friends to follow him. The 4 humans looked around the palace confused. Chad sat beside Orihime and took the offered apple from said girl while Ishida and Ichigo looked around. You shouldn't go through Dan-san's things. I don't think he would like that, Inoue squeaked. I don't care what that Shinigami thinks, Ishida spat and opened another locker only to find clothes. I think she's right, Ishida, Ichigo growled and looked out of the window before he walked to the door and opened it. His breath stopped in his throat. There before him stood Ulquiorra with his usual impassive look. The Espada rose an eyebrow at the Shinigami's presence along with his human friends. What are you doing here? He inquired calm. Instead of answering him, Ichigo slammed the door shut and leaned against it with a shocked expression. His friends looked at him in confusion till the door was blasted out of its hinges and flew across the room along with the orange-haired Shinigami. Their eyes widened when they saw who was responsible for the attack. You. Ulquiorra, Inoue whispered, afraid. The Espada looked at her with apathetic eyes before he turned to Ichigo and blocked Zangetsu with his arm. The resulting explosion shook the Primera's palace. Ulquiorra only rose an eyebrow at the new strength of the Shinigami before he let himself be pushed back and out of the palace. He gave the Shinigami a long look before he shot upwards towards the top of Las Noches. Not to be one to run from a fight, Ichigo chased after him. The other 3 looked at what happened for a moment before they snapped out of it. Should we follow them? Inoue asked worried. I think we should, Ishida nodded and created a Racier platform for them to stand on. Come on, Chad, Ishida called, but the tall man shook his head. I see no chance for me to help. So I will cover for you should someone else try to follow you, the tall teen explained monotone. Ishida and Inoue stared at him a moment before the Quincy nodded his head. The 2 shot upwards towards the fight while Chad readied himself in case an enemy appeared. A sudden surge of dark and evil Ryatsu raining down on the 2 of them made them gasp. What is this Ryatsu? Ishida gasped while Inoue only shuddered. As they came above they gasped. There above them stood Ulquiorra in a monstrous form holding Ichigo by his throat. The Shinigami hung limp from the Espada's grip as Ulquiorra pointed a finger to mid of the teen's chest. In a quick dark green flash he shot a hole through the orange-haired teen's chest and let him fall. Inoue gasped and sent her fairies out to catch him in hope to save him with her powers while Ishida gave the Espada a cold glare. He would never admit it, but he accepted Ichigo as his friend and now said friend was killed. He activated his light bow and took it upon himself to kill this monster. Inoue in the meantime had stumbled to the lifeless form of her savior and expanded her healing field around him. She watched in hope that the wound would heal, but soon despair made itself known inside of her. The hole in Ichigo's chest wasn't closing at all. An explosion caught her attention and she saw how Ulquiorra simply shrugged off the Quincy's attacks. Save us, she muttered. Save us Kurosaki-kun, she pleaded as tears escaped her eyes. What she didn't know was that her pleads actually reached the remaining parts of Ichigo's consciousness. She's calling for me. I need to protect her, I will protect her, were his thoughts before he succumbed to the darkness inside of him. His ryatsu spiked as he suddenly stood tall behind the crying woman. Inoue turned around slowly and froze at the sight of the hollowified Ichigo. Ulquiorra turned to him and worse an eyebrow. Impossible, he muttered while the new hollow stood still. Who are you? He inquired only for the hollow to reach to the side and Tensa Zangetsu flew in his open hand. The espada actually looked shocked as Ichigo swung his sword sideways, letting a huge part of the ground grumble from the shock wave. The force was so great that Inoue was thrown back, but Ishida caught her as good as he could in his wounded state. It seems that you can't understand me, the espada sighed as Ichigo began to howl and release an ungodly amount of ryatsu. Ulquiorra only charged a 0, but to his shock so did Ichigo. Impossible, he thought with wide eyes. The following explosion shook everything above the dome and Dan appeared beside the two humans, though they didn't notice him over their shock. Dan looked at what his friend had become, whistled slightly as he watched how Ichigo wiped the floor with the espada. Only then the two noticed the Primera standing beside them, absolutely unaffected by the battle before him. Dan-san? Inoue asked with an audible whisper. Yes, Inoue-chan, he asked, not letting his eyes wander from the battle. Can't you do something? She stuttered and looked at the monstrous form of her savior. I could, but I want Ulquiorra to find the answer he has been searching for during his existence here. This is the only way for him to find it, Vandal stated, calm, not bothering to look at them. What answer? Ishida snarled, unnerved. He's looking for what he is missing since he became a hollow. He's looking for the reason of his despair. Dan sighed and stopped a boulder flying towards them with one hand. Before they could question him further, they saw how Ichigo crushed the espada under his foot and charged up a 0 between his horns. You have been devoured by the senses of your own hollow. What a pity, Dan sighed as Ichigo released his 0. The 0 was so strong that he created a hole into the dome and killed everything in its way. Out of the smoking hole came the mangled body of Ulquiorra. Only his upper body, right arm, left wing and head seemed to be untouched. Ichigo walked out of the smoke. Dan looked at the downed form of the espada and sighed. I guess he reached a conclusion, he thought, and appeared beside the two of them as Ichigo placed his sword against the espada's throat. He gripped the hollowified teen's wrist and stopped him from killing Ulquiorra. Ichigo seemingly didn't realize his presence as he tried to move his sword further down while the espada gave his superior a apathetic look. I see you have reached your conclusion, Ulquiorra. Would you mind sharing what you found? Dan asked as Ichigo finally realized that he didn't make any progress. He turned to Dan and howled as he released his ryatsu that made the ground grumble. The Primera only looked at him with a deadpan expression, not affected by the pressure. That's enough, Ichi-chan, he sighed and rose his right hand. He pressed his index and middle finger against the hollow's forehead and the mask shattered like glass. Ichigo's eyes looked devoid of life before he crashed face first against the floor. Kurosaki-kun, Inoue cried in panic and ran to his downed form. Why did you save me, Vandal-san? He asked, emotionless. It seemed like you finally reached a conclusion to your never-ending search and I want to see the outcome of it. Dan shrugged and helped the already regenerating espada to his feet. You know that I will die anyway, his tone actually showing some pain. I know, that's why I want to see the answer you found, Dan explained just as a light blue storm formed over Ichigo's downed body and shot into his body. The hole in his chest simply vanished. Instant regeneration. The kid always surprises me, Dan grinned and got a strange look from his comrade. You work for the Soul Society, Ulquiorra stated, already knowing the answer. Yes. Like Aizen, I'm a Shinigami, but I have the powers of a hollow and use them to infiltrate his organization, Dan explained, very calm. So your name isn't Vandal? He actually smiled. Nope. Name's Phantom Daniel, lieutenant of the 2nd Squad under Captain Soifon and the boyfriend of said captain, Danny grinned. It is good to meet the real you, I guess, Ulquiorra nodded towards the upcoming Ichigo. Dan threw him a look that told the Shinigami to shut up. Ulquiorra only took a few shaky steps towards Inoue and held his hand out towards her. Are you afraid of me, woman? He asked calm, but he felt his life force running out. That moment his wings began to turn to dust. Inoue gulped but gave him a determinate look. I'm not afraid of you, she stated with more confidence than ever and tried to reach for him. Is that so? He smiled weak as he finally found his answer. I see. So that was the answer you were searching for, the Primera smiled. The Espada only nodded and dispersed into ash. Silence befell the group as they watched the ash being drifted away by the wind. You may have been a stuck-up but in the end I think I finally met the real Ulquiorra, Danny smiled as he felt the erasure of his comrade vanish. Come on, no time to waste, the others are dealing with the remaining Espada. But Aizen and some of the Espada have already left for the faked Karakura town. We need to hurry so you and the others can go there while I deal with the remaining loyal forces here in Huenco Mundo, Danny explained, serious, gaining a nod from the three. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 5. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author HauntedScythe on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.